Hey, it's Joel Walsman, CEO and Master Electrician of Jefferson Electric. What? That's what the prompter said. Okay, you got me. No, Joel didn't get leg shortening surgery. He didn't have a terrible Nair accident. I'm Tim Shackleton, EPRO's project manager and an electrical apprentice. The reason we traded spots today is to show you that this is a pretty DIY friendly task. I have nowhere near the amount of skill that Joel does, but I should be able to walk you through this just fine. Let's get to it. The project today is to get more lighting in this space. You've seen on our channel actually the electrical inspection of this house. We've had other renovations. Today we're installing can lights. Joel's done this before on the channel, but I want to show you just how simple it is. We're actually going to put a row of 3 can lights in a line here and 3 more on this side. There's also another half of the basement with a very similar footprint that'll get the same treatment. The hope is that long term, this can be the kids' play space. That there's very little to break here. We got glass block windows and brick walls behind whatever we finish out with. Metal studs and joists and beams. So it's a solid space that we hope kids can bounce balls off the walls and tackle each other and just be a rumble zone while we're, having dinner and guests upstairs. So materials wise should be pretty simple because the circuits are already in place. So wires run from the panel to the switches to the lights, and I'm really just swapping out the minimal current lights for more lighting. So I'll need a little bit more wire. I've got 14-2 wire because this is a 15 amp circuit down here, which is generally sufficient for basic lighting like this. I've got my lights themselves. These are LED retrofits. And then the can housings. Now some of you are saying, no, Tim, don't go to the dark side. Why does Joel still use those things? Couple reasons. Number one, because the master electrician that trained me said so and values them for junction box spacing, for overall hardiness. Number two, in this certain scenario, my wife and I are not yet convinced that we'll finish this ceiling. We might go with more of a painted look, and so for these to be exposed instead of just a little wafer light feels like it just gives it a little more robustness. Lastly, some wire staples. I won't need too many of them because I'll actually be drilling through the joists, and that'll provide the securement and support for my wire, but anytime I run along the joist, I'll need to support my wire every 4.5 feet. For tools, I've got my driver and my drill. Quite honestly, if I'm speaking to DIYers, what I've read is that for a project like this, your driver can probably do the drill work you need it to in its highest speed, and then you have the driver for setting every fastener after that. If you have old tools, you probably want both. The drill for actually doing the drilling and wood boring, and then a driver for any fasteners you need. I have a right angle attachment that I'm not sure I'll need. My driver's pretty compact. I think I'll be able to fit it in any joist bay that I run into. I've got an extender as well, couple bits, but I'll probably mostly be using this 3/4 inch spade bit in order to leave my wire enough room to breathe wherever it goes. Writing utensil to mark straight lines. I've also got a laser level for that purpose. DIYers, if you don't have one of those guys, what you can do is measure things off, put a nail in one spot, a nail at the other end of the room, and tie a string between them, and that should give you a pretty straight line. I've got my tester from Kaiweets. The nice thing about this is that it serves as both a non-contact voltage detector for quick checks and a multimeter, so I can get more information out of it. Some PPE, glasses, gloves, my tape measure to make sure my light's centered, a utility knife for cutting Romex sheathing or anything else I would need it for, and obviously wire strippers. The reason this project will be simpler than most is because it's really just a light relocation. The basement lights circuit is already in place, so if I hit this breaker on, there's those lights. This is wired along this joist, through the joists to this switch box, which yes, is currently floating, but will get nailed down once we have a finished surface. So this is running from the panel. This switch then, which is covering the half of the basement we're working on, runs back to the first switch location. The first light location, sorry. So all I'll need to do is disconnect this light and run this wire to my first can, which will be slightly offset because we'll have 2 rows instead of just center lighting. From there, I'll wire the next cans in series, 4, 5, 6, and it'll dead end there. Obviously, circuit-wise, it'll run back on the neutral that way. So we know we have this general 3x2 format, but where exactly are we putting our cans? I can flesh that out for you. So we're sitting in my living room, which has the exact same footprint and sits directly above the room we're in the basement. This is what helped me to pick 6 lights because if you'll notice, in here we are 2x3. Now if you know the number of lights you want and are trying to figure out the layout, there are lots of online calculators that'll help you do that really simply. We found this web page through a basic Google search and found it to be really helpful. We'll put a link in the description for you all. All you need is the basic layout you want and the full-length dimensions of your room. If your room is not as perfectly rectangular as ours, feel free to think of it as multiple rectangles and use these accordingly. Our room was 25 feet long, so it's 300 inches, and it was 13.4, so that'll come out to 160 inches. Now I calculate, and they'll break it down for me in inches. Take note that as a general rule of thumb, your distance from wall to light is generally best to be half of the distance from light to light. That's because their cones of light will overlap a bit, whereas you're not getting any illumination from the walls, so you want to make sure that they're actually a little closer to those dark spaces. Let's get those can lights mounted up. So we've got our dimensions. We're going 50 inches off this wall and 40 off of this wall. So we measure out our dimensions according to spec. There's our 50-inch mark, and oh great, the only joist bay that we cannot use. So what are your options here? Essentially, you want to stretch or compress your whole array such that all the lights are still in a rectangular uniform shape without one light being out of sync. So what we decided to do is actually expand the array. As I've realized, I can probably put the walls a little bit tighter to each wall. That'll put us in this joist bay right next to it. That will also dodge another joist obstruction further down the way, and it's fine on the far side. Now we can get mounting the cans. Joel was willing to lend me our CC laser level for this project. You'll notice that it creates a perfect crosshair on the ceiling. If you don't have that, that's okay. What you can do is find the joist closest to a measured mark. I measured from the floor because I had the level, but you'll measure from the ceiling. Set a nail in that line and then measure the same distance at the end of your run. And put a nail there, tie a taut string between the two, and now you can both visually see and reference a straight line for each of your lights. Now there's 3 parts of the can that would be really good for you to pay attention to here. The first is these little notches all around the framing, which mine are actually covered by this foam contraption, that mark the center. Those would be far better reference points than trying to measure into the middle or figure out a contraption to do that. But you've got arrows all over the edges of the can for alignment. Number 2 is the junction box. You can save yourself a lot of wire by making sure that you always point the junction box towards the center of the room. If it's on the outside, then you're needing to run wire around, provide proper bend radius, and still get into the can. The third is the feet. Generally, the feet should be a proper length for you to fit into a joist bay, excuse me. But in some cases of sister joints, like I have plenty of in this 1915 home, or perhaps other obstructions, you may need to notch and break off lengths of the feet so that you can slide them a little tighter before nailing them in. Probably worth owning up to the fact that I did not name a step ladder or a hammer in my materials list. Apologies to everyone. Whoa. You should be in there. Oh, so here we go. Just that situation we were talking about. Our arms are too long because this joist is actually doubled up. So I'm going to stretch out the arm and I'm going to not make sure to not cut too short. I'm going to just be able to snap off that arm right there and now slide them back so that the bump in the one rail fits in the open side of the other rail. It may take some finagling now that you've got those bent edges to feed it back into the can. But you can feel free to be a little rough with it. Now we reset, and boom, we got plenty of length, but we'll also fit between here. Boom, there's light number 3. So we've got one row, let's get the other row. Okay, that's number 6. We got 3 by 3 ready to go. A couple things to point out. Number 1, you'll notice the old lights are still on. You don't have to work in the dark just because you're doing electrical. We haven't been anywhere near the circuit yet. These aren't hooked up to anything. There's nothing electrified about them. So if you can, work in the light, wait till you get to that wiring component before you shut off the circuit. Number 2, we're going to be drilling some holes now for the wire. We're going to run all that wire before we connect it into the circuit in the panel, so we'll still be de-energized. But it is important to note that you do need some separation in that run from the device itself and from the bottom of the joist bay. Let's get into that. Alrighty, I've got my 3/4 inch spade bit. That is important for the amount of wire that we're trying to put through here. It'll really just be one wire per hole. But if you have more than that, you're going to want to make sure that you open up that hole size so that those wires can breathe, because they will generate heat. We slid our laser level over a bit. It's not dire that this line be exactly straight, but because we had it out, it will make the wire pull a little bit easier. So one thing to note is that while I do have my line run down the wall, the height above the joist, above the bottom of the joist, is also important. The National Electrical Code specifies that I must be 1.25 inches above the bottom of the joist. Otherwise, I need a steel nail plate put into the joist, excuse me, for protection of that wire, because any screws coming up through there could nick it or otherwise. So, making sure to stay high, and here goes nothing. You may have also noticed there that I tucked a hand behind the stud. That was to make sure that I didn't have any ventilation, any other pre-existing wiring, or maybe water too might be run on the other side, so just doing a visual and a physical inspection of anywhere I cut. Jefferson Electric generally prefers a self-feeding auger bit, which will have a spiral tip on the end. I'm having to drive a little bit harder, but as a DIYer, either one will probably get it done for you. Cuckoo, ka-choo. And that brings us to our last junction box. So we're good on drilling. That means next is to run wires through all those holes that we just drilled. Now you could kind of go two routes with that. If you're in an old home, you're probably using old wiring in your old lights that's gonna get disposed of. So you can continue to leave those on, and you can run new wire between all your fixtures. Because I had this whole home rewired less than a year ago, I'm actually going to dismantle these lights now in order to reuse that Romex to our new lights. So I'm gonna head over to the panel, cut it off, and then start unwiring these old lights. Okay, we're at the panel. Joel's used the illustration before that you can stop your car immediately by slamming on the brakes, but often it's better to slowly shut things down. The same's true electrically, that if we kill the switches first, that's probably a little better for the overall system. But with those off, we will kill that breaker to be sure there's no power on the way. And now we can unscrew things and dismantle the old stuff without any worry. Okay, so we killed the power, but we're testing. As soon as you stop respecting it, it'll bite you, I believe is the expression. And you'll see we've got some nominal voltage there, but we should be getting 120 or so nominally. So we are safe to proceed because we're only getting about 10 volts there. So things are off and we're good to go. All right, well, woo! These screws are put in with, what are they called? ECX or something. They're like flatheads and square drives and Phillips all in one. Don't tell Joel. I can't find my #1 square drive, so I'm using a flathead. Okay, so when we get in the box, we've got 3 colors. This is pretty standard to modern wiring. Hopefully you run into this. Even if you don't have Romex, generally still black, white ground is the case. You may not have a ground if you have BX wire, which has a big metal jacket around it. In fact, we could show you some of that right over here. So here's some leftover BX from some of the previous old wiring. We had an anthology of old wiring in this house when we got it rewired. A little knob and tube, a little BX, and even some Romex here and there, but it was all a mess. So if you see anything like this, your jacket is your ground because it is metallic. And then you've got 2 wires coming out of those, generally black and white. Black being hot, white being neutral. From what I understand, BX is perfectly fine. You've got all 3 components of a safe circuit. It's starting to get aged. Knob and tube you should definitely replace if you have it, but BX, if it's functioning properly, you're fine. If you start seeing problems with it, probably worth upgrading to a non-metallic cable like Romex. Okay, so what I've done is I've separated all our conductors. If I can just kind of orient you a bit, we've got 2 wires coming out of this box. This guy runs through these joists back to the switch. The other runs straight down the spine of the ceiling to the other light so that it will turn on when we turn this one on. The switch leg, therefore, is what this guy's called, is going to be really important for us to hang on to. This is the guy, if we don't want to do any major rewiring, this is the guy we need to save, and that's going to go into our first new light. So I'm trying to apply some pressure to this clamp so that I can pull him out and set him apart. Now, the feed over to the other light is no longer necessary because that light is being replaced by all our other lights. But like I said, because it's pretty recent rewire, this will give me a nice long run that I can probably cover several of our new lights runs with this stuff when we string it out of the wall. Depending on your situation, how much you're trying to reuse. Again, your wire connectors may or may not be reusable. If you see any kind of plastic bulging or kind of that whitening effect, when plastic is bent or stretched, you do not want to reuse those. If They look all right. Just be mindful that connections are often the most often point of failure. So don't skimp, but be mindful. I'm being careful here to not damage the outer jacket as I pull it back through. For efficiency's sake, I'm pulling maybe 2 or 3 joists at a time. Visual inspection for any nicks in the jacket. I'll get a load of that guy. He'll need to be at least stripped back there. We got another one there. So that'll have to be a strip. That might be, we'll see if that's enough to use or not. Alrighty, now we can get to our new wiring connections. Alrighty, back to our switch leg. So the all-important switch leg. That guy needs to go into my first light. Technically, it could go into any of them. Just makes the most sense to not reuse, or to reuse the wire. And this is the shortest run, so that's easy. Wire be secured and supported every 4.5 feet along its run, and within, Joel would know, but I don't. It's either 12 or 18 inches from any junctions. So you'll see there's other points here, and there was actually one over there that I pulled out before. I find in order to not apply pressure to the wire itself, because that's often where you'll create pinching and compromise in the outer jacket, a flathead is good, especially if you can actually get the outside of the staple, just to be safest, and then to just kind of pop against the bottom edge of your joist. Same thing, now I'm pulling my Romex back away from it so that I can get under that staple plastic, not the wire, and just pop him on out. Went for the bigger guns with the Romex free, and use a hammer claw. Alrighty, so now I've got this stuff free. Now, I obliterated this plastic staple, so I'll need a new one, but I will need that within that 12-inch range from this junction box to the light. Instructions are inside. And then these pre-made leads, all of these are running to the fixture itself. And then in this case, these are just push-in connectors. So I'm gonna get them separated. I'm gonna match color to color with the fixture. Black goes in with the other blacks, and any of those other 3 slots does not matter. White with the white, and then ground wires are always designated green or bare. So in our Romex it's bare, in the fixture it's green, but they do in fact go together. When I am trimming this back, I want to make sure that I leave enough for future serviceability. So what I kind of like to do is grab a handful of it and give it a twist. So I create an extra loop than I need. And then this also needs to feed not just into the face of the box, but on the edges of these boxes are little clamps. That's probably the biggest difference I've noticed between a master electrician and an apprentice, is that all their cuts are so confident and so accurate that I always have to miss long first and then usually often make a second cut. Okay, there are knockouts in the top of these guys. You can actually see a similar feature in these other bigger knockouts, but on the edges they're just little kind of oval shaped guys that I'm hoping I can pry out. Not sure if they're gonna go for us or not. If not, these guys. Oh. Alrighty, now we're gonna strip back the outer jacket, because it is not actually supposed to be in the junction box. It is just a 1/4 inch, but that is all. So we're gonna score it very, very lightly. It should then peel itself off. Go ahead and take that paper with it. That's protecting that bare copper ground. And then just cut away from yourself and the wires at the top. Beautiful. So my wires are stripped. The length that I want on them is enough for them to show through the end. And you can see that the pre-made connections, you can actually see that wire wiggling around in the end. But the pre-made jacket shows all the way into the pushing connector. So that's your target strip length. So tucking this guy in here. Boom, he's visible in the top, black to black, and I do not see bare copper on the underside of the pushing connector. I was doing the math, and I realized we have two options here for wiring the rest of the lights. One is in fact better than the other. So because this room is significantly longer than it is wide, I can make either a trident of sorts or a letter E out of the rest of the lights with my wire in order to reach them all and all flow back through this switch leg. Or I can make one almost big loop, so more of a U shape. The U shape is going to use about 40 more feet, which comes out to about $40 worth of Romex, because right now it's about $1 a foot. So we're going to go with the letter E method. So we're going to take maybe the old stuff, if we can find a length long enough. If not, we'll break into the new stuff. And we're going to cut 3 lengths that'll run between the short distance. And then we'll also need 2 long lengths from this light to the next one, and then one from the middle light to the last one on the far wall. Let's go ahead and eye those up and then snip them. I'm starting with the old stuff because I'm hoping to use plenty of that. I think 100 feet, which is the roll I bought, is going to be really close to what I need in here. So this is my first nick in this length, and I think that length should be okay. So I'm actually going to cut a little above that because I'll be able to strip back to it. Okay, we're fed into the clamp. Make sure we don't score any of our other wires. Okay, wires are all stripped. Now it's just the color game. Something I did not do well last time was I probably did my order wrong. It's generally best to hook up your grounds first, then your neutrals, and then your hots last. Okay, so that's our feed to the next light. The last feed we'll be putting in will be to the next light. We have one more spot for that. Make sure you have the suitable connectors you need. Let's hop over to the other end of this switch leg, whatever this would be. Yeah, I might need you to comment and fill me in. All right, after a duel with the old Romex, mainly getting that outer jacket through the clamp, we're good to go here. Start with ground. It's in there. Wouldn't mind just a touch more. Okay. Then my neutrals, my whites. There we go. Beautiful. Boom. Now, that is all that this box is going to need. It's not going to feed next to it, nor is it going anywhere else. So we're going to tuck our ground back and away. It's a little short. So boom, there's my hot. Now we're tucking these in, the ground first. Got to create maybe a little separation with the hot and the ground by putting the neutral between them, tucking them tight into the box. Take our faceplate, tucks down into the box, and you should actually, on this model at least, see them poke through, and then press it back. Beautiful. Now, the last thing to do here is that this housing is still able to move a bit. Most housings have a screw on them. You can tighten down to make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. So again, if you can do anything in your power to not use a flathead, you're probably a better DIYer and electrician than me. But here we are. Okay, he's in there. We are solid. And once we've secured this wire in a foot of the box, okay, now we're running to this guy. These are our holes that we drilled out previously. Alrighty, so now from our switch leg light, our first corner, if you will, first light, we're working long ways. Our width run is done. I've got the roll on the ground, the wire roll that is, and I haven't made my cut yet because I don't want to miss short. The longer you're in the trade, from what I hear, the better you are at estimating lengths. But I'm not there yet. I'm not confident in my abilities. All right. Same thing, we need to make our turn, give ourselves a loop. And then into the box. I think I'm okay with this. Okay, that's all of our wire connections in this box. The last thing for us to do is to make sure it doesn't slide on us. Okay, now we're working long ways. To this long run, then we'll have another branch of our E, and then one more long run, and then we'll turn the F into an E. Housings are in, and they are wired, so now let's get some light. In these in particular, the Edison socket for a light bulb, but the female version of this, is actually inverted. It's facing up, whether that's for light distribution or what have you. I'm not sure, but we're gonna release that because we actually need the jaw that it's attached to for these spring clips on our retrofits. That will also just give us a little more slack so that we can screw ours in just fine. If we wanted to, we could disconnect these at this proprietary connection, but either way is fine. Now this is where I might be accidentally creating some controversy because I plan on leaving this floating above the fixture, and I can't think of any code violation or problem that would cause, but if you've got one, please let me know. Okay, that's in there. I'm now gonna pinch these clips, both, set them between these jaws. They should catch enough for me to let my fingers out of the way, and now as I push them up, they're gonna pop into place. Alrighty, let's do that for the last 5. Breaker's hot. The light switch is all that stands between us and beautiful glowing light. Cameraman Tom, if you would please. 3, 2, 1. Lovely. This should serve us well as we frame and drywall, maybe do something with the floors coming up here. Thank you for joining us. We love having your views, but even more so the interactions through comments online. Keep them coming. I look forward to filtering them and sharing them with Joel and our team. Subscribe to Electric Pro Academy for real skills to save you real money.